Hello, this is Joe Walensky, and I'm speaking with some of the presenters that'll be at our User Assistance Boot Camp at WritersUA West coming up in Seattle next month. And right now I'm speaking with Tony Self. Hello, Tony.
G'day, Joe. How are you?
All right, where are you speaking to us from today?
I'm speaking from Melbourne in Australia.
All right, so how many hours apart are we? So it's night for me right now.
Yeah, well, it's day middle of the day, but the following day for me. So if you want to know what's happening tomorrow, I can tell you now.
That's right, it's tomorrow. Uh, Well, if you're not familiar with Tony, he's been involved in software user assistance for a long, long time and still going
Oh,
at it. So, besides flying acrobatic airplanes, which I know you do, what kinds of things do you have going on work-wise that are interesting and new?
probably the newest thing that I've completed, I suppose, is a training curriculum for Synchrosoft Oxygen Author, which is a very popular DITA authoring tool. So up until now, it hasn't had any training materials as such, apart from ad hoc, little videos and tutorials and workshops. So I've put together a formal curriculum for that with a structured pathway through the use of Oxygen for DITA authoring. So that's been an interesting project, and you'll probably start to see courses using that material being advertised shortly.
Yeah, that'd be good. I'll have to look for that because I teach each quarter at the Bellevue College. I do a hands-on class that's an introduction to structured authoring and data, and we actually use that software
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
course. So
Yeah,
yeah, so
yeah,
maybe we'll use this on the training materials too for that.
yeah. Good idea. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, you're going to be talking about a lot of different topics at the conference. Let's see, it's going to be information architecture. There's also single sourcing. There's also DITA, and we're doing things in both a track for newcomers, kind of a boot camp, basic training track, and then there's one for more advanced practitioners. And yours are kind of covering those two different areas.
Yeah.
So,
In
uh,
fact, you've got me working quite hard, Joe.
yeah, yeah. Well, you gotta
Probably a
play for
long
your
way to come for a
supper.
short talk.
But so in the I know in the description for the single sourcing topic, in there you mentioned that you were going to talk about how conditional publishing broadens the ways single sourcing can be used. So just wondering if you could just talk about some of the issues involved there.
Sure, yeah. Well, one of the other things I mentioned is that single sourcing is defined by different people in different ways. And so when you think about it, if you have a Word document or a PowerPoint or something like that, you probably find there's a file save as HTML. So when you think about it from that single Word document, that single source, you could produce a printed document and an online document. So that's sort of the very basic level. But as you get more sophisticated, more advanced, you have the needs for more sophisticated mechanisms. And conditional publishing is one of those sophisticated mechanisms. So it could be that in the paper version, you want slightly different text from the online version. For example, the paper version might say, fill in the form at the back of the book, but that doesn't make any sense in the web environment. So in the web or the online version, it might say, complete the following form with a hyperlink to that. Or it could be that in your online document, you've got a video, but in your paper document, you can't have a video, or so on. So as you get more and more sophisticated, you then find that maybe you've got different variations of the same product manual. So it could be that the product is sold under different brand names or under different versions or editions. And so you might want your documentation to be able to be produced in those different versions and editions as well. And so that's what conditional publishing is about. So conditional publishing makes it possible to apply rules to different parts of your text or your content so that it gets included in some outputs and excluded out of other outputs.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page about that. I know in classes I teach at the University of Washington, other places, I talk about conditional publishing. But, I have to say that, when I would say that like more people than not that I talk to about their projects, and maybe a lot more people than not, uh, just use the same content
Mm.
repository without adjusting it for context, different contexts, different deliverables. I don't know if I know you found that, and what that really means, and
Mm.
how, how do we maybe address that with people?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly. I do encounter that sort of thing, and often it'll be time pressures or lack of training because often people don't understand the conditional publishing features within a tool. And usually they're easy to use, so there's not a real excuse. But if you don't know they're easy to use, they're hard to use. So I think that's one of the issues or the obstacles. But I think there's another technique that's often on the other end of the scale, I guess, because some people who get familiar with conditional publishing fall in love with it and then have stacks and stacks of nested conditions, and then somebody else coming into that project finds it very difficult to fathom why are all these different colors here and what are all the different permutations. So there are some other techniques that you could possibly use, such as context agnostic writing, which means you try to remove a lot of context so the same piece of content can be used easily in different outputs. And it could be as simple as using, instead of repeating the product name of the thing you're documenting, you might just refer to it as the product or the software or some generic name. So there's no need to conditionalize those sorts of things as well.
Hmm. All right, yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, well, we'll just have to see what happens in that area and see if it becomes more common as more people learn about conditional publishing and and try and embrace that. But yeah, I
Yeah.
know what you mean about it adding a lot of complexity to a project because it certainly
Mm.
does.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm.
Another topic that you were going to be talking about was information architecture. That was one that's kind of an introduction to that as a concept, which is there's a lot of principles in there that most technical communicators and user assistance professionals are familiar with. In uh, in terms of how you're presenting this presentation, what are some of the like what like what's kind of the core message that you're trying to get across about information tech architecture as a specific discipline?
I suppose the main feature is that, um, and you've pointed or you've touched on it too, that information architecture is something that technical communicators have done for a while as part of their broader role, but haven't recognized it necessarily as information architecture or even labeled it that way. So it could be part of the planning process or the designing the navigation or setting metadata. But there there has been a separate discipline of information architecture that's evolved, I guess, that's not necessarily used a lot in the, or you encounter a lot in the help or the user assistance world, but in other forms, particularly web content, then there is a much more defined information architect role. So the purpose of the session is to explain what the principles are, what the discipline is about. It covers the four main principles of information architecture, which covers things such as metadata, searching, navigation, and presentation. And so each of those should be familiar to technical communicators, but it looks at what in particular information or how the particular facet that information architecture takes to look at those disciplines. And it is like a multidisciplinary role, information architecture. So
But
and
I
there's
in the Seattle area, I go to a meetup group that's specifically called information architecture,
yeah.
and I would say that uh, well, a lot of the people that attend that meetup group would categorize themselves professionally as information architects.
Yeah.
Much as, I might say that I'm a user assistance professional, another person might say that, they're broadly a technical communicator. And the people that identify themselves in that way, um, they definitely have like a point of view and a perspective that maybe is different from what a lot of us see in on the UA side, where there's a lot more attention uh, to taxonomies and metadata,
Mm.
and it in a way that I think that's there's definitely a lot of substantive things about information architecture as a discipline that are different from what we do in
Mm.
user assistance, but a lot of the things that are done ultimately are transferable and might be called by different names or done maybe less formally.
Absolutely, yeah. I think too, as probably because of the advent of content management systems, and maybe more specifically in our field with XML architecture such as DITA, the potential for documentation sources to become more complex is higher. So consequently, there tends to be more specialization of roles. So, for example, in DITA, as it has been with a lot of help authoring tools as well, the base underlying architecture is a topic-based architecture where people are writing, where the technical communicators are writing standalone information topics that then get assembled into a product, which could be a help system, or it could be that some of those topics are used within a software application as embedded user assistance, for example. But from a planning perspective, somebody has to work out what topics are needed, how they're going to be assembled, what the information products are going to be, how they're going to be managed within a content management system, how the work is going to be delegated, what the big picture is. And so I think probably they'll end up being some sort of evolution of an architect role, which is probably or could be similar to what we used to call an editor or a department manager or a designer, and then information developer roles who are more concerned with the words within the topic as opposed to the overall architecture of the information system.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I think you're exactly right about that. So I think that'll be a good session to
Mm.
give people of different experience levels thinking about that IA discipline. You mentioned DITA, and another topic you're going to talk about is in the grad school track for the more experienced practitioners related to DITA techniques and best practices, and I know you're going to talk about a lot of in-depth things there, but I was just kind of separate from that talk. I was wondering if there have been any developments to talk about with respect to DITA Help.
Mm. Right. Yeah. In the current DITA standard is DITA 1.2, and the standard that's currently in the final stages of development is called 1.3, naturally enough. And by final stages, that doesn't mean it's about to be released because there's an enormous amount of work to put the specification document together. A lot of double checking and triple checking and going over things. But at least at this point, we know what's in DITA 1.3. And there are a number of features within 1.3 specifically for user assistance. And in fact, they have been slightly broadened to cover potential future user experience areas. So, for example, there's a new element that can be used for window descriptions. So, in a help system, if you want the help to open at a certain window size, then that wasn't previously possible within DITA unless you coded or chose to put some metadata in a sort of generic field. But now there's a specific field for window design. And likewise, for context help, there used to be sort of a thing called the resource ID element that you could sort of use to put your context IDs in, but they weren't quite exactly what you needed for most forms of user assistance. So you could get around it, but it wasn't ideal. So in DITA 1.3, there's a new specific element for that sort of information, and that will make it a lot easier for, not so much for help authors, because help authors aren't going to be coding those elements, but more for the tool vendors that can make tools that allow help authors and user assistance professionals to more easily select those settings or those attributes.
Hmm. And so for people that are interested in DITA Help specifically, where would they go to look for information about that?
Probably one of the best resources is something called the DITA Help Technologies Guide. So if you Google for DITA Help Technologies Guide, it will take you to a resource. It's getting a little bit dated, but when 1.3 is out, it'll be updated to reflect the new changes in 1.3. But that's probably the best resource at the moment. But there's probably sometimes there's a view that because DITA doesn't have a lot of help features embedded within it, within the standard, that therefore it's not quite suitable for producing user assistance and help. But in fact, just out of the box without any customization or modification, you can, and I say out of the box, but DITA is a standard, so it doesn't actually come in a box, but most of the authoring tools provide standard facilities using standard DITA 1.2 features to allow you to produce Microsoft Help files, web help, mobile web help, etc. And it's fairly easy then to work out ways that you might make that context sensitive. And if you're using embedded user assistance, because DITA is all XML, it's also relatively easy to work out your own pathways for pulling content out of your DITA topics and then embedding it within the application itself.
Hmm.
So many of the features are actually already in the features that you need are already in there. And much of it is because DITA is naturally XML, which means that it's an interchange format already, so it can be reused easily. And it's topic based, which is like help systems anyway. So its architecture is actually very similar to something like Microsoft Help, where you've got HTML topics. So in DITA, they're a different form of topic, but they're still topic chunks. And there's a table of contents of some sort, which in DITA is called the map. And so those elements are already in place natively within DITA. So it is actually quite easy to just produce help content without really bothering about what you're doing. It's just working with DITA.
All right, well, thanks for giving that summary and update of what's involved in DITA Help. And so anyway, thanks for also taking the time to talk about all the things going on in your different sessions. And I'll see you in Seattle in just a few weeks.
That'll be great. Look forward to it. See you then, Joe.
All right, thanks, Tony.
Okay, bye.